Hi there. Welcome to the 5th edition of Auto Insider, a podcast from Automobility Limited. I'm Bill Russo, the founder and CEO of Automobility. We're a strategy and investment advisory firm based in Shanghai. And since 2017, our firm has been helping companies navigate the disruptive forces reshaping mobility, from electrification and connectivity to autonomy and new business models. With China as the epicenter of these shifts, Auto Insider brings you conversations with the innovators building the next generation of mobility at global scale. And just a reminder before we start, if you enjoy content like this, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast so you'll get notified of future episodes. And to help you and others discover stories like this on how to build and profit from the future of mobility. Let me tell you about today's guest. I've known him for some time. We're very pleased to be joined by Sng Yih. Sng is the president of Autoliv China, the world's leading automotive safety system supplier. And under his leadership, Autoliv has evolved from a localization model toward full co-innovation in China, acting as both a tier one systems integrator and a supply chain aggregator, enabling Chinese and global suppliers to scale together. From partnerships and memorandums of understanding in Morocco to integrating Chinese suppliers into Autoliv's global footprint, Sng and his team are redefining what safety without borders really means in the smart mobility era. Sng, can you start by sharing your personal journey in the automotive industry? I like to bring people the backstories of the people I speak with. So you can tell me a little bit about your journey in the automotive industry and what brought you into your current role to lead Autoliv's business in China.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me. I think, we've known each other for quite a few years. I started in the auto industry 28 years ago. And from day one, I've been involved with China. And then later, APAC. And we the whole family moved to China 2004. We've been here since, from Beijing to Shanghai. I joined Autoliv about 4 years ago when I really, realized that for anybody to be successful in China, the organization itself is so important that you must be structured right. You must have the right product, right technology. And for me, the decision was very clear. A lot of Chinese OEMs were coming up. The whole platform was going to change. To design for China from Europe, for the US, is not going to be fast enough. So when, I was talking to Autoliv, I made it very clear that we need to have that local capability, the local autonomy, which we do. And my CEO always says that Autoliv in China is a Chinese company. And he says that to the investors globally. He says that to the audience in China. So for me, it was a very natural fit. I've been here for a very, very long time. And I've been through I would call it the 3 phases of the Chinese automotive industry. And for this latest phase, if you're not here being not just manufacturing, but development, the whole supply chain management, if you're not here all in, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, one of the things that I think a lot of folks who come here learn quickly is that it does require a clock speed adjustment. Things have changed rapidly, have scaled quickly, and more of the assumptions made by, I'd say, businesses about how to do business in China needs constant refreshing, right? You always constantly have to think through, is it still work? You can't drive by looking in the rearview mirror at the way China was. You have to have a head-up display on where it's going. In that regard, how is China's transformational pull, how it's viewed toward the future, how has that transformation shaped your leadership approach?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, that China has gone through, in my opinion, 3 different phases. From early days where it's growing. When I first got involved, it was very entrepreneurial. You need to be entrepreneurial. To the second 10 years of growth, super growth, right? So it really is about getting your plants up, getting your capacity up, supporting your customers. To right now, you really need to be agile. You really need to be willing to adapt to your customers' requirement, to the market's requirement. The way we do it is try to stay ahead of the game, right? As a safety leader, we're involved very deeply, not just with our customers, but with NCAP, Euro NCAP, CNCAP. We worked very closely, and we develop through data. So we don't do our work based on what our customers tell us they want. We work with raw data. We work with accident data. We work with the ground up development. So I think that gives us the ability to go to the customer and say, I think this is coming. This is with what you have. We can design something for you. And that has proven to be very successful in China. I think over the last 7 or 8 years, a lot of our global first launch was achieved in China because the customers here wants differentiation. I think globally, you and I read a lot about on the global media about Chinese car makers. They seem to lump Chinese car makers as one. They're not, right? There are about 100 companies. They all behave differently. They all have very different requirements. So it's being close to the customer, close to the market, and kind of forecasting what they need. And don't be shy about it. Talk to them, right?
Right. Yeah, I think, and you've had to adapt. When I first met you, you were at Lear, and you've had other experiences when you came to China. So maybe tell me in your time, you mentioned the 3 phases. In your time, how has the market evolved? Give me your summarization of your experience in watching the market evolve from where it was when you started, and how long ago was that? Maybe you can share with us a little bit about that backstory.
Wow. 97. It's all about joint ventures. It's all about setting up joint ventures and how to manage them. So HQ, back then HQ was US. HQ really want to get a foot in China, but they're not going to put in a lot of investment. And in the early days, you don't need a lot of investment. So it's all about finding the right partner and then actually having entrepreneurial leaders in China who could navigate this whole system that has not really been set up. Right. So when that whole system and that whole platform is set up, so we used to have so many joint ventures, and it's about keeping everybody happy. That was my job for a long time. And then when the market truly took off, right? It took off, and then VW was doing really, really well. GM was doing very, very well. And the Japanese players were doing very well. It's about getting the business, supporting them. At that time, all that platforms were coming from overseas. Nothing was launched first in China. So if you have the business overseas, you have the first mover advantage. So it's about really being able to bring the cost down, bring the speed up. China's speed wasn't something new. Back then, it was also required. But it's very much more operational. And I think in this newest phase, being able to adapt to your very many different customers' needs. So we took a look at some numbers. Barely 3 years ago, I would say our share of business from global OEM to China OEM is more than 70% global and less than 30% China. And this year, we'll probably end up very, very close. Very, very close. Now, you would think that replacement is not one for one. It's like 10 customers replacing one platform. Because, you know this better. We have a lot of customers in China. Their platforms are smaller. Each one of them have multiple platforms as well. So if we go by the previous decision-making process, we would not be in most of these customers. So it's about taking the calculated risk. We cannot rely on numbers, just the former IHS, now Standard & Poor's. We can't rely on just those numbers. We need a lot more intelligence internally to figure it out.
So I think as I would capsulize what you said, when we come to China, regardless of who we may have worked for, our business was largely bringing what we did globally to China. I call that localization. In order to compete in China, that's not enough anymore. There has to be more collaborative innovation to do things needed for not only today, but where we're anticipating the market to go. Autoliv has been in China for decades. How has the mission evolved from the starting point, localizing global products, to today's imperative, co-developing with innovations within China?
Autoliv is a very unique company. So a lot of people have spoken to me about China for Global. They've asked how we do it, and a lot of companies want to do it. I've always said, that's step 3. Step 1 is about China for China properly. Now, Autoliv has had the ability to do China for China way before I joined. So I think I joined at a perfect time. I reaped the benefits, that the team and my predecessors have put together. Autoliv is a company that year in, year out, we just focus on making ourselves better operationally from a product because of the segment that we're in. Safety, we cannot make a mistake. So the team in China has been very strong doing that. And the team in China has been supporting Geely, has been supporting Great Wall. We have built very, very strong relationship with Chinese OEMs, even when they were much smaller than they were today. So with that background, the team is very strong when I come in. And I think what I allow the team to do is to think about different ways of doing things that perhaps we can be even faster and adopting new technology that we don't have through partnerships and bringing other people into this ecosystem that we have. That safety is not just about a seat belt, an airbag, a steering wheel. It's about how we put this whole thing together and offer better value. And in China, a lot of the new startups especially, they support this very much because they want to focus on their E&E platform. They want to focus on industrialization, on battery technology.
And I think filling a needed role of acting as the orchestrator or the integrator of the different systems. Focus on your domains, but safety is about integration, right? It's not one system, it's many systems functioning together. So let's put that back into the context of co-innovation, collaborative innovation. What does that look like specifically for a safety systems company?
We have a process that is 1P1P. We call it globally. One product, one process. So we make the same thing to the same standards as much as possible using the same process globally. So doing it faster in China because of the needs of the customer doesn't mean that we cut corners. We have been pushed over the last few years to be able to meet the China speed, so to say. But to transfer this ability outside of China is not so difficult because we're not telling them to do something differently. Sometimes it's just about sequencing. Maybe you used to do phase 1 and then followed by phase 2, followed by phase 3, and it takes 2 years. Whereas now we kick off phase 1, and before phase 1 is complete, once the part that allows you to kick off phase 2, we do that, right? So it's about bringing your supply chain in early. So you need a supply chain who's willing to come in early, to invest maybe even without a contract. And in China, that's very possible because we truly build partnerships, right, with the whole supply chain. So that enables us to be not just the system integrator, but the whole value integrator. And engineering and manufacturing cannot work separately. We do that very, very closely in China. And it also helps that CTO is based in China and he had 20 years in China before he became the global CTO.
Yeah, we'll come to the personnel challenges and how you've navigated that, because I think there's also an interesting story there from what things that Autoliv has done as a company in China specifically. But one of the things I want to make sure people understand is there is an innovation pace. There is sort of a clock speed, as I referred to it earlier, that is quite different here. Oftentimes that's viewed as compromising safety or introducing risk. By being fast, you're not being as precise, which is, I think, the global paradigm of measure twice, cut once, make sure you get it right. The clock speed here is different. How is China's innovation pace? What is different about it? And how has it influenced your company and your global roadmap and your business processes?
I think first off, in our product, the customers would be less aggressive in adopting a new technology that's not proven, right? So a lot of what they ask for is based on very solid foundational designs that we have. Now, how do you redesign something or add functions to that, especially on the steering wheel, right? We do a lot of the innovation of that in China because it is not just a safety part, it's also a visual part. So, but we do not sacrifice, we talk about speed, we talk about cost as well. We cannot afford to sacrifice the quality in doing this. So, if the customer has an unrealistic timeline, we would say no. We would say no. And I think the customer respects that. They do respect that. And so they would adopt. In China, the customers tend to be more open about adopting an industry first that we pushed out. But they would not, many of them would come to us and say, I want this type of industry first. They actually defer to us for our solution. The latest, if you had seen it in the Shanghai Auto Show, zero gravity seat, the industry has been wanting that. But when we were not ready, we wouldn't push that out. So when we finally launch it at the auto show, we're very confident we can do it. And adaptive safety, this is something that is coming up, and we showed what we have, and customers were very, very interested. But they wouldn't give us a timeline that would put their customers at risk, just because of, we're a safety part.
So given the type of components, the type of systems that you build, obviously that does require give and take on the part of the needs of the company and the requirements to deliver on safety. As you said, the auto show this year, there was a very strong emphasis there, which I think is probably helpful to a company like Autoliv to know that they need experts, people who got decades experience. So having a core capability set in a critical field like occupant safety is going to be a plus for your type of a company. But I'd say the role has evolved from a parts supplier, a tier one in your case, to an orchestrator, right? You're not just an aggregator of components. It's also joining the different parts of the supply chain together in ways that a local Chinese supplier could not do. I think if you're searching for the formula for what makes foreign, and I think that's what a lot of companies doing business in China today are struggling with, is what's non-commodity about what we do. Yes. Obviously, solving a high-level problem like safety, active and passive safety, is critical, mission critical for the company and its brand. But having the ability to understand the problem solving in a way that a very highly qualified company can do is something that differentiates and hard to copy. That's not something that's easily localized by a Chinese competitor, although I'm sure they exist. But what does being a tier one integrator mean in today's era? Because what's changing in China, and I think the world doesn't see it or doesn't really understand the magnitude of it, is we're in the software-defined era. We're in the era of the intelligent, connected vehicle. What does being a tier one integrator mean in a software-defined era?
I think, firstly, we need to understand what opportunities lie in this scary-sounding software-defined vehicle. A lot of people see it as a threat on whether they're challenging what we know and whether we can deliver. We see it as an opportunity. When there is a new requirement, a company like Autoliv, we have the scale and we have the ability to pull in partners very quickly to fill the gap that we don't have. So, for example, we're in the process of forming a joint venture with one of our suppliers who was able to partner with us to develop a new, ECU very, very quickly. And they are a very reliable supplier globally already. And in China, we were able to do it together. Autoliv, do we need to invest, 1,000 engineers and spend 3 to 5 years to develop it? No. I think we have the scale, the reach, and enough of the research and development to pull partners in and say, hey, let's do this together. And we can then provide solutions that are ahead of what our customers want us to do. And that is such an opportunity that would not have existed before in the traditional non-E&E architecture.
So the fundamental base architecture of the car is changing. You're providing safety solutions, both passive and active systems for intelligent vehicles. How do you bridge those domains in understanding some of the core capabilities that you are actively trying to bring to today's modern electronics market?
Well, obviously for different customers, they ask for different things from us. There are customers who still would prefer to buy just the seat belts as a commodity from us, the airbag as a commodity. And on the other spectrum, we have a customer who's going to launch their L4 vehicle next year, who from day one told us, we want you to design the whole system. So they took a hands-off approach and said, this is our car. We want you to develop the full passive solution for us. So this is what we want our car to do. Please propose the safest solution. And this solution has to be global. It's not a Chinese market car. It's a global car. It has to work in the US. It has to work in the Middle East. It has to work in Europe. So we have on one end of the spectrum, customers who say that through this kind of projects, we learn a lot. And we are what we are today, especially in China, because of our customers. They come out with, because they have to compete, and they come out with all sorts of requirement to differentiate. And safety, even though it's not one of those fancy luxury that you can call, but actually a lot of our customers are saying safety should be the number one luxury. And such customers want to really work with us to help them. And having us do the whole system, a lot of time will end up cheaper. So rather than saying, okay, this is my best solution for your pre-designed architecture, we are offering you the most cost competitive and collaborative system between the airbags, the seat belts, and the steering wheel.
And that's not a taking and making it cheaper is sort of the commodity game. Solving the problem that gets to a more functional solution efficiently is becoming, I think, the imperative for suppliers in this business. Otherwise, you're fighting a commodity battle. Can you share maybe one or two examples of collaborations with Chinese OEMs or technology partners where you've been able to win because of your capability to do that level of integration?
I think let's not get carried away that we are so far out that people would pay us whatever we charge. We have to be competitive. We have to be very competitive. And we leverage our customer relationship to propose solutions that would bring down the cost without sacrificing. So I think that is the first thing. So we have 67 customers in China. So different cost requirement, different design requirement. But one of the things that we push very hard is don't ask for new design if you don't need to. If you use a proven design, that you don't need to develop new suppliers, you don't need to develop new toolings, and it's been proven for safety. We don't want our customer to see a lot of our products, especially airbags, right? So if it had worked, if you let us in early to design with you, and if we can use it across several platforms, the cost will be much, much lower than if you ask us to do something very specific for 50,000 cars. So a lot of our customers, because they work with us at a very senior level, are helping us do that. A lot of customers, because if you leave it to engineers and purchasing teams, they don't make that kind of decision. But we approach, all the way to the top. And my CEO would come and support us in certain areas where we talk to chairmen of OEMs that we could do that. And it has proven to be very, very effective with the Chinese OEMs. And then we bring our suppliers in early as well, especially the electronics ones, because the electronic content is going up, especially on the steering wheel, on PPMIs. Having the supplier in, and if they can be a strategic supplier, we would form joint ventures so that they become a global solution rather than just a China solution.
Right. Global solution inside the Autoliv frame. So you're bringing suppliers who can solve problems, help you with integration, cost management that you can then bring to your Chinese customers and your global customers.
Correct.
So, and that's I think another aspect of this. So in order to be successful in today's China, it's beyond just localizing the global product configuration. It's not even adapting minor modifications, but really co-innovating to solve today's problem and to anticipate tomorrow's solution in this new intelligent, connected, smart electronics architecture.
It's also the process, right? Because technology has moved so much. Automation, you know very well, China's level of automation, since the country pushed out Industry 4.0, they're serious about this. It's not something that we talk about. A lot of availability at a very, very affordable standard allows us to grow revenue and drop headcount at the same time. I think that is something that a lot of people sometimes miss out because a lot of focus is on product. But the way of working, the way we ensure quality and the way we manufacture things in an automated way. We've adopted AI for now 3 years, a lot of it in safety. We've been able to increase the accuracy and reduce headcount at the same time.
Interesting. Let's turn to how you're using or leveraging the platform you built here for the world. As I think everyone, if they're not aware, they're becoming rapidly aware that Chinese brands are going global in a big way. The Chinese supply chain was already global, but more in the commodity domain, glass, steel. A lot of the biggest suppliers in the world have been in the supply chain of the automotive industry for quite some time. But now we're seeing the Chinese companies, the OEMs, and even some of the new and emerging systems providers, suppliers. I think Automotive News had 15 Chinese companies in the top 100 suppliers in the automotive industry. So 15 years ago, in 2010, there were zero. So it's gone that quickly. A lot of them are in the domains of battery and electronics, and that's become a key part of how we source, things into the automotive industry globally. Autoliv, you as a supply chain aggregator, how are you working with Chinese suppliers as they go global? And I'm talking both working with the companies that you sell to downstream, your OEM clients, and also the tier twos, the ones who stand behind you with parts. Describe a little bit about your evolution and how you manage your role in the supply chain.
I think Autoliv, because there has been for many years a global supply chain management team that looks after the biggest buys. So the commodities has gone global for a while. So the big Chinese suppliers have set up in Vietnam before this latest push. But the fact that our Chinese customers are going overseas to build factories rather than just exporting their way is forcing companies like us to say that we need to bring our suppliers out. That the challenge is that Chinese suppliers do not like to open up factories overseas because it disrupts their own supply chain. A lot of them don't really know how to manage overseas. They are very competitive locally. When they're overseas, there's so many issues. When you and I first came to China, we had to deal with a lot of cultural issues. It will be the same thing for the Chinese suppliers going overseas. So as far as possible, they don't want to do that. They would like to export out of China. But the latest push for our customers, so they are tier twos and tier threes, but for our tier one customers, which are the car makers, they are going overseas. So there's no choice. They are going overseas because of tariffs. So the Chinese suppliers, our suppliers, if they don't go overseas, they will not be part of that. And if we're not able to bring them overseas, we will not be able to service our customers at the pace and the competitiveness that they are used to in China, which means they may be patient for 2 to 3 years in the beginning, but our competitors would do that. So if we don't do it, our competitors would. So in a sense, I don't want to call it reactive, but you don't really have a choice. If any company thinks that you have a choice of using the European supply base to support Chinese customers, then I think you'll be in for a surprise.
I've heard you say that global suppliers like Autoliv must learn to either compete with, sell to, or partner with Chinese local players. How do you pick among those choices?
I say that during our global suppliers conference. Top 100, they represent top 100 suppliers came to China during the auto show. And in my welcome speech, I told them our Chinese suppliers are going to Europe. You could either compete with them, you could partner with them, or you could sell. Right? I mean, if you think about it, there really isn't a fourth choice. So we will be very, very happy. We'll be more than happy to kind of match make. We like our suppliers in Europe. We've worked with them for many, many years. But if there's a way to make them more competitive, and to kind of help them form joint ventures, it will make this whole process much smoother. Very much like when Western companies first came to China. The joint ventures were quite challenging in the beginning. Gave quite a few of us our initial jobs in China because they needed us to help integrate. But after that, a lot of it became very, very profitable for both sides. And I think now with that experience in the 90s, most companies know how to integrate this much better. At least we will support our suppliers in doing that. So one of them has already signed an MOU for a joint venture. That was just a few months ago.
So maybe structurally, we could talk about that. How have you created the platforms that allow for the supply chain integration that you're describing? I've also heard about the work you're doing in Morocco, where I think you're working collaboratively with European suppliers and helping them retain their business while at the same time selectively partnering with Chinese investors who can bring capabilities to the region. So maybe you could describe a little bit more about that initiative.
I think the biggest suppliers that we have are already global, even though they originate from China. It's the medium-sized ones that don't have the scale or the experience or the resources or combination of these three factors to go out on their own. So what we can really help them is to bring them out together as a group. So 10 is better than one. When one is too small, you put 10 of them together. We negotiate better. We negotiate better deals together. We can consolidate logistics. So shipment to one common place in Europe. And 10 is just the first group that followed us to Morocco. There are other locations as well. So I think our role as Autoliv is to support our supply chain and say, let us help you in your expansion plan, right? You bring your technology, you bring your know-how. Let us help you find your way in the places that you want to go, that we would encourage you to go because it's better to consolidate people together. And then, but we have to work that with our European team very closely. We need our European supply chain team coming to say, China, this is what I need. So these are the gaps that I have in my supply chain today. Some of my suppliers are facing with the inflation in the last few years. Some of them have decided to stop doing business. So the receiving region must be able to say, come, I have this business for your suppliers. So I think the easiest attraction is to aggregate the business for that. And that's why we bring the first 10. We don't want to do it in a rush. The worst thing that can happen is you don't have enough volume to support supply or bring overseas. And that will be quite sad.
Clearly the motivation here. I mean, we're sitting in the number one car market in the world. It's been that way since 2009, 16 years, the leader. 34% of all the cars in the world are made here. China exports this year somewhere between 6.5 to 7 million. It was about 5.9 million last year, which is 6 times greater than it was just a few years ago. It's far away. I mean, that number is the equivalent of Germany and Japan's production combined. So it gives you an idea of the scale. And it's by far number one in new energy vehicles. So the supply chain associated with that, I would say it's not just batteries and electronics, it's also the intelligent connectivity, the EE and software integration is transforming the industry in fundamental ways. But the scale alone creates cost efficiencies and economics that are far different from anything we've seen up until now. Obviously, the concern is at the speed at which China's operating and the competitive nature that compromises might creep into the system, which could compromise Autoliv functioning as the fulcrum between cost and quality. And if you err on the side of too much speed, you compromise quality and therefore the brand integrity that you're striving for. So as the orchestrator, as the organization that brings the pieces of the different parts of the band together and allows it to function in harmony, you're acting as a global systems, not only aggregator, but enabler for globalization, for what is needed. And this is the part that I think isn't well understood by the industry globally. It needs the scale of the supply chain emerging from China. That supply chain without orchestration would not deliver the kind of quality needed because it lacks the experience at doing the types of systems integration that companies like Autoliv can still provide. But you've got to be the orchestrator. You cannot be passive and let it happen. Because if you don't do anything, they're going to come and figure it out eventually. The Chinese supply chain will eventually find a way forward. And I think that's where I think the multinational car makers and suppliers have to find a way to add value inside of this very changing automotive industry that they're all involved in. So how do you balance this? How do you play that role and balance cost, quality, and resilience across your network?
I think first off, we take our position as the market leader, in terms of scale. We take it very seriously. It's not about how much more money you can make. You actually can't because we're not the only player. But I think being the market leader with the scale that we have a responsibility to really develop this so that we can bring the industry forward. Safety is not a compromise. commodities, right? We don't exist to save the lives of people who can afford better cars. So we need to provide the solution. We need to provide the basic protection for the whole range, and we do supply to the whole range. And in China, the whole range is a very, very big range. So what we will not compromise is quality, because that cost of quality in our business is so much higher than in other business. It can put a very healthy business out of business. I mean, we have competitors that went bankrupt because of major safety recalls. So you can approach it from a humanity perspective. People lose their lives if our products don't work. Or you can approach it from a financial and say, hey, you're doing well today, and if you're not careful, you could be out of business. So yes, we want to be fast. Yes, we want to be competitive, and we want to be resilient. The whole supply chain is no longer just in time. It's about just in case, right? So we need all that, but our fundamental quality requirement remains. So China is faster. China is not less quality than Europe. I think Autoliv, we're very proud to say that we maintain that level.
You said 1997, and that's where the industry really started to grow dramatically. What's changed the most in that time, in your view?
I think choice. In 97, it's so hard to buy a car. It's so expensive, and there are so few choices. Right now, gosh, it's amazing. And also the whole industry, in the last 15 years, China has developed 2 generations of electronics engineers, specifically for automotive, right? It's just that scale, right? Our industry is so big. It's one of the 4 pillars domestically, and universities would churn out engineers for our needs. Now, of course, the planning can never be perfect, but overcapacity is not just a manufacturing area. But because of that competition, that intense competition brings up the quality. I think the misconception about China being cheap and poor quality, that has to go away.
And that may have been true at a point in time, but it's certainly not true in today's China. And as you point out, the technical skill sets are quite evolved. In particular, it's not just the world's biggest car market, it's the world's biggest digital economy. And its role in the mobility problem solving is underappreciated, because if you don't live in China, you don't see that every day the way we do. And that's affecting the types of products you see on the road. And I'm finding a lot of the work that's needed is to educate the global automotive executive leadership on how to understand what's causing things to speed up, what's causing the consumers in China in particular to now prefer Chinese brands over multinational brands. What is it about their mindset as they look at a product in today's China that's different? And they had fewer choices in the past, as you said, but they have more choices now, and they're increasingly choosing the local brands over the multinational brands. To be competing in this world, you have to accept the fact that there's a China challenge to the global auto industry. But what leadership traits are essential to be successful in both doing business in China and doing business globally where China exists?
I think the ability to tell a story convincingly, right? Because I think there's so much noise out there. And Bill, you play such an important role to dispel as much of those misconceptions and so as the leader of the China business, my job is to really have a voice on the table of the global executive team. And I'm very lucky that in Autoliv, we're structured that way. A lot of my colleagues are not in the global executive team, so they have 2 layers to communicate. Whereas, Autoliv is perfectly structured for us to be successful. So we don't really have an excuse not to be. So I remember the first task was to, after the lockdown, the global team asked, how come, the Chinese electric cars are doing so well? How come, some of the European ones are not doing as well? Because they are selling very well in Europe. Why is it not selling so well in China? And we've been through that conversation so much in China. The intelligent EV, the smart EV versus just an EV. So to make them understand, we spent 3 hours. We spent 3 hours trying to dissect, but I could tell that, okay, the message was received maybe 50%. Some of it get lost, right? So I arranged for them to test drive 3 Chinese EVs in Stockholm. And that kind of is much more effective than a very well done PBT, right? So it's what after they drove it, the answer is right there.
Yeah. You have to respect how far it's evolved and how quickly to a level that I don't think was expected. And the question I think a lot of people are grappling with is when will it come to the rest of the world? But before it does that, there's the issue of it's overly fragmented here. Right, there's an industry that is you said earlier, 100 is usually thrown around, but I think in the EV lane, top 10 group companies get about 80% of the market. So it is relatively concentrated, I'd say. It hasn't consolidated yet. But how is that going to affect the supply chain? As this industry restructures going forward, how do you think that's going to affect the supply chain?
I think because our industry is so big that it's, the failure of any OEM is not about the OEM and their employees. It's about the whole supply chain. And I say this for both local and international. You know, I hear so much about Chinese car makers are successful because they are heavily subsidized by the government. I get pissed when I hear that, right? Because the subsidy available is for the industry. It's not for Chinese car makers. For anybody from anywhere in the world who wants to innovate and develop in China, the subsidy is available. And I say that because I work for a multinational and we get a lot of support from the Chinese government in some of the areas that we operate. And I've been here almost 20 years, right? So it's not just about the subsidies. It's about the, that whole drive, that whole entrepreneurial spirit. And it will consolidate, but it will not consolidate in a way that people think, right? So because if a city is relying on this OEM that supports this whole supply chain, if they go out of business, a lot of people will lose their jobs, right? So consolidation will also happen, which is why the government is stepping in. Different OEMs have different impacts. Some are more vertically integrated, some are less. So if they are not integrated, then A, losing business to B doesn't impact the whole supply chain.
One of the biggest beneficiaries of the policy shift that happened in the 10 years ago favoring electric vehicles was a foreign brand, Tesla. Some would say it was designed to attract them to come in so that would spark consumers' interest. But the idea that the government control how much you incentivize a particular product, they never took away incentives from gasoline vehicles. They make a lot of those and they don't want those companies to go under. But the winners in the electric vehicle race, the biggest one is BYD, and they're a private business. So I disagree with anyone whose conspiracy theory was the government concocted a scheme for foreign brands to lose and local brands to win. It's a choice that we have to make as to what type of product to build. And Chinese consumers, as you said, have choices now they didn't have before. And the ones that are affordable, that offer the right balance of technology and solve my mobility problem efficiently, they're tending to win. And increasingly, that's falling over to the local brands.
Our global customers are changing as well. So a lot of them are coming up with Chinese platforms and they are responding. And their China team has been given much more authority relative to before. China for China designs coming up. Some of our global customers are sending very senior people to China now, relative to previously. So yeah, it's not the end yet. I think it's really just the beginning.
I think that's one of the misconceptions, which is how much of this was forced on the market by the government policies. Yes, it's a policy-led country. It does that more than other places around the world, but the policies it was equal opportunity as it stands for anyone could have participated in. It was a choice whether to follow or not. And I think the ones who follow fast, those who follow the policy directives to invest in new technology tend to get rewarded, especially in a market where consumers value the technology, right? The consumers in China, especially if you can make it affordable. If you're offering technology and it's expensive, it's a lot better if it's democratized. And that's why I think companies like BYD and Xiaomi and others are starting to pull ahead of the competition. Question is, does that change the supply chain in a fundamental way? Have you as a supplier of a critical system felt the impact of the shift inside of the types of things you're doing? And if so, have you done anything structurally to tap into that?
For us, we actually see the benefit of it, but because we have we have close to 1,000 engineers in China. So some of them do applications, some of them do R&D. So the fact that we have been set up this way in China for a long time, way before I came, allow us to be able to innovate as the market demands for more. So our peers in the international companies segment, they would struggle if they have not had that for a while. So if they have been taking global design to adapt to the local needs, they might struggle. So I think it's opportunities and threats for the multinationals. But one thing we could see in the last 10 years is not just the rise of the Chinese car makers, it's also the Chinese suppliers reaching a level of global competitiveness. So it's no longer just cost. It used to be, they're fast, they're cheap. But now in many sectors, it's not just that. It's also because they are better. So yeah, we need to compete, we need to innovate. But the thing is, it's not us and them. It's we are one huge automotive supply chain. I'm always looking for partnerships, win-wins, where we can make our products more accessible and to increase technology to lower the cost.
That's perfect. The one thing you alluded to earlier, I want to come back to it, is you mentioned your CTO who was in China. Now he's the global CTO. Maybe you could describe the logic behind how that came to be.
So he was the head of engineering for China, but Fabian has been here for 20 years. So he's done operations, he's done engineering, he's in I think practically every job except finance and HR. So he knows the market really, really well. I think as we were looking for a global CTO, my CEO, this has actually very little to do with me. It was my CEO coming to me and say, hey, can I steal your guy? So, I think what Fabian did in his previous job, what our customers demand that we do for them, and the fact that Fabian led the team successfully to deliver it, earned him that role. I did very little except saying, yes, boss, you can have him.
As long as he stays in China.
That was actually, again, proposed by my CEO. Because
it's the right answer. The dissonance between headquarters understanding and truly somebody who understands the world and the global headquarters and understands China, that's a rare combination. That's a wise approach, and one that very few, I haven't seen very many, if any, companies take it. They have R&D centers here, but they still got a headquarters, reporting relationship. But having the global CTO sit in China it's got to make it much faster for you to get what's needed.
It is, and the fact that he's not even someone from Europe that is posted here. So there's two elements, right? He knows the China market really well because he's been here 20 years, but he's also representing, the global organization, leading the global organization. So it's very seamless, I would say. And now we have two voices on the table, right? One for China division, one for the China market in terms of technology.
Well, hopefully that message comes through to our audience. Thinking ahead, what's next for Autoliv, your global strategy, and where do you see China fitting into that?
I think one thing about Autoliv, every time we go through a strategy cycle, currently we're in the midst of one. It's never changed. Our vision is very, very simple. We just want to save more lives, right? So, 35, 37,000. Now we want to aim for a much higher number. And it's how do we use our technology, not just within the automotive industry, but also outside, especially the pedestrian safety. We'll definitely continue to do what we do to support our customers, which is in cabin. But it's how we use the technology that we have to work outside of the car. So we do have products, but the mission remains the same: to make it competitive, to make it fast enough, and not lose market share because of the lack of competitiveness. Because we need that market share to save.
I used the word earlier, the phrase "safety without borders," saying you're a global company and you're working across the east-west. You're bringing the learnings from here to the global system. What does safety without borders mean to you personally?
Personally, I was asked this question in an interview with CCTV 2 years ago. But the interview was alluding to politics, the world decoupling and all that. And I said it's not as relevant for us because we exist to save lives and we don't discriminate against any life. So It's our responsibility to globalize the best solution and to adapt it quickly so that there's no borders there. And it's something that I think the company shares as a whole. And the faster we can do it, the more we can be influential.
You used the word earlier, democratization. Nothing is more appropriate than democratizing safety. Nobody should die in a mobility device. Unfortunately, very many do. But this is something that shouldn't be gentrified, the opposite of democratization. Yes. You only get it if you can afford it. So by being borderless means being frictionless, which means as efficient as possible, is the way I would interpret what you've shared. If you were to put into one word, it's hard to do, but one word to define the future of mobility and why, what would it be?
My wish would really, if you want to put it in one word, is to collaborate. Because I think there's so much very short-term actions, and be it political, be it financial. There's so much waste in not collaborating. Because I think just like when the whole automotive industry started in China, it started with the foreign players coming in, sharing what they have in exchange for the market. So there was very limited waste in developing because we collaborated. So in this new phase, if our customers, if our suppliers, if the tier ones are willing to collaborate more, I would say the limited resources would be better used.
Collaboration. That's a great way to kind of put a bow on all of what we've discussed, Sng. Well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Auto Insider, and a big thank you to Sng Yih for joining us and sharing his insights on how Autoliv is transforming from a traditional supplier start to a global safety solutions ecosystem orchestrator, blending Chinese innovation, European craftsmanship, and global collaboration to deliver safety without borders in today's and tomorrow's smart mobility era. We hope this conversation offers you a fresh inside look at how global and Chinese companies can build together rather than compete in isolation. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to Auto Insider on this platform so you'll be notified of future episodes, and to help other people discover the stories like this from the front lines of mobility transformation. And until next time, I'm Bill Russo, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Sng.